It always takes a second. And we are live. Greetings, fellow unbelievers. Today I'm joined by Joel Pearson. He's across the pond in England, so it's a little later for him right now. But he says he has a day off tomorrow, so he's willing to hang around a little later too. Today we're talking about deconversions, which is this whole series is about. Joel, take me from when you were telling me earlier that you were part of a missionary and you spent some time in Chad. So at what point did you start to realize that this stuff was just, well, for lack of anything better to say, just pure nonsense, is how I pretty much put it. And your whole pathway from being a believer to becoming an unbeliever, just let us know how that went for you, and interactions with your family and stuff when that happened, or even if they do know yet.
Well, they do know, but it's something that it's really hard to pinpoint just a single instance. But I'd say
Right.
the key thing was reading The God Delusion, because that was by
You
the
mean
time I
this one,
finished
right?
the book. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably not like the best, most philosophically constructed and everything, book,
Mhm.
but it was enough of a scatshot approach that everything in it hit, and I couldn't really argue with it.
Right.
And I think it's to do with the way that I approached the book, which was so the way I stumbled across the God Delusion was I discovered the Selfish Gene,
Mhm.
and reading the
Another good
Selfish
book.
Gene, because I was raised as a missionary. I went to mainly religious schools or local schools,
Mhm.
and I went to high school as an American school, which was an international school in Cameroon, and there
Okay.
they taught us creationism, which
Wow.
I believed because this was a Christian school. I trusted the teachers because why wouldn't you as a kid?
Of
You were
course.
expected to teach you true things. And this one particular teacher gave us these religious tracts. Are they the chick tracts or something like that?
Yeah. Chick
Yeah.
tracks. Yeah. Lots of us are very familiar with those hilarious little
Yeah, about the
comic books.
bombardier beetle, and they seemed really against global warming as well for some reason. So I had all that in my head, and they were never taught us biology in school. It
Mhm.
was we only had chemistry and physics. There were no other sciences
Oh,
in that
you're
particular
kidding
school.
me.
In that American school, yeah.
Wow.
So I had that embedded in my head, and then I kept getting in England, of course, where the majority are atheist. It was kind of weird holding on to that belief, but of course I thought it was real and I thought it was true.
Of course, yeah.
And it wasn't until I read The Selfish Gene where I suddenly realized evolution is very real and it makes much more sense than magic. So I had to sort of adjust my beliefs
And how
against
how
those.
how how did that go for you? Like, was it like, did it, for lack of a better word, was it a little bit painful, or because I mean those are deeply held beliefs that you had.
Yeah, it's one where when I started to think about it and talk about it and ask other people, I discovered that a lot of other English Christians are old Earth creationists.
Hmm.
So it was all right because I thought and when you're inside religion, you're very much into the authoritarian way of thinking, where if an authority says it, it's okay.
Hmm.
You tend not to sort of realize that you don't think that in your own head, but you ask someone that you think is smarter than you, and that if that person says it's okay, then it's okay.
Right. Yeah, which
And
makes sense because you learned that you should trust your elders, so to speak, at
yeah,
an
religion
early
is
age,
quite
right?
this is kind of top down thinking
Yeah. Yeah.
approach. I'd say less so in that a lot of Christians tend not to go down. They tend to think they're better than Catholics. I mean, Protestant Christians, in terms that they don't have a pope. But there is still this sort of pastor mentality where the people in the leadership know best.
Hmm. Yeah. Understandable. I mean, I think any religious like group of any, they always have a hierarchy of, even I was raised in Judaism, so it was always like the head rabbi sort of thing, and then worked its way down. Same as well.
All right, yeah, that's interesting. I don't really know much about Judaism. It's one of those
Well,
ones I have to study.
yeah, it's I mean, the Christians also, a lot of them say that they have a new covenant, and they kind of dismiss the Old Testament, but which in my mind they don't really have a right to do, because a lot of their beginning stuff comes from the Old Testament,
Yeah,
which is
that's where
basically,
Jesus came from, the Old Testament. Basically, he was pieced together that way.
yeah. And he even says to obey the laws that his father put out in the Old Testament too, all
Matthew
600.
5:11, was it?
I think so. Something, yeah, it was in Matthew for sure. I just don't remember. I know lots in biblical stuff, but being able to tell you which verse and stuff it came from is a
I
little
think that's
harder for
the
me.
jot or tittle one.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. I think so. I could probably bring that up. I have a copy somewhere over here.
Yeah, so discovering evolution and discovering that they lied to me, that was a bit of a shock. So it was a kind of a combination of discovering that this person here that I'd been warned against. I didn't really know much about Dawkins except that he was an evil man and you should never read any of his books, as discovered through and through that school. But then
Right.
his book was just so stunningly well written, well argued. I've never read anyone who was better able to put their point across, just
I
so
agree.
clearly.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah,
He's very good at that,
very
making
clever.
something that's hard to understand understandable.
Yeah, so I decided to look for more of his books, and I discovered the God Delusion, and thought, if I'm right, what have I got to lose?
Hmm.
Um, and I thought it would at least be an interesting thing to delve into, because this guy, this brilliant man, if he can explain things to me in such a way that I can get my faith better understood, then it's a win-win for me, you know.
Right. Of course.
So I decided to approach it completely honestly and go, at the beginning of this book, I will go whichever way um, the evidence goes, because I always thought of myself as being a rational person,
Hmm.
even while being religious.
Which is kudos to you for at least attempting to go into it with some honesty involved there.
Yeah, I think if and I've always had considered myself an honest person, mostly because I think this is something to do with being autistic, where you
Mm.
tend to be very um, anti-lying. It's very difficult to read people who lie, so honesty tends to be a little bit of a, if anything, too much honesty. You know, being tactless is a thing.
So you
So
are autistic, am I to understand?
yeah, I have Asperger's syndrome or Asperger's syndrome,
Okay.
depending on how
Yeah.
you pronounce it. And that was one of the things where I went to actually get a clinical diagnosis just to make sure. Um, but I think I deal with it fairly well.
I would have
So
never have guessed, to be honest. And I know
it is.
others that have, some form of autism, and if they don't tell you, a lot of times it's hard to notice, because I
Yeah,
guess you guys get so used to behaving specific ways that are, I don't know how to say it, but like socially acceptable. I'm not sure, because a lot of
yeah.
autistic people,
The
I guess,
the
have a hard
psychologist.
time.
So the psychologist I was talking to said I'm very good at covering it up,
Hmm.
but I do find social situations quite draining.
Oh
You
yeah,
know, just need to be
even
on
I
my own
do.
and recharge.
Yeah.
But it is a whole spectrum. There are plenty of people who are autistic who have real trouble communicating
Hmm.
and just coping with the world.
Well, you're doing good here so far. Anyway, carry on with your whole story away there.
Yeah, so reading The God Delusion, I got about halfway through it, and I was really uncertain because he'd made a lot of good points, and I was like, I'm going to find a weakness somewhere. Um, so I went to church that week, and then the week after that, I finished The God Delusion, and I left the church.
Wow. Wow,
So
that's kind of
it's a quick
extreme.
turnaround. Yeah, I went back one more time to pick up my guitar equipment because I was a worship group. I played lead guitar,
Excellent.
and I was a worship leader for a while. I used to do worship leading on and off, although I wasn't really comfortable, you know, being in charge of the group.
Hmm.
Um, but it's one of those things where, yeah, I just made up my mind and thought I can't go back to that anymore, and I needed to at least go and research it more. You know, I thought
Hmm.
I can't be in that atmosphere because
Right.
I knew, of course, from the book and from doing other research that you can manipulate somebody if you have them in that kind of environment where it's you're surrounded by believers and they create this sort of atmosphere. and it makes you have, these emotions. You can control someone through their emotions. So I thought I need to
Yes.
just separate myself, get myself on my own, sort my thoughts out. And I spent about 2 months or so studying philosophy, the history of Christianity, cosmogony. I think it is the origin of the universe as opposed to just cosmology.
Mm.
And
Oh,
yeah, so
yes, 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 yes.
doing like a deep dive. I read Hitchens, Moore Dawkins. I read Harris. Discovered Richard Carrier as well.
Yeah,
So
Carrier's
reading all these
fantastic.
philosophers, yeah, and Dan Dennett as well.
Daniel Dunn, yes, I have a couple of his books as well.
Yeah,
I like the way he thinks.
and in particular the debate videos with Hitchens were amazing. He
Mm-hmm.
kept making really good points that I just couldn't get around.
Yeah, many of the people that he's speaking with during those debates also have issues trying to get around some of the stuff. Because, I mean, what can you say to some of the stuff that he talks about how harmful religion can be sometimes? And these guys just get stymied. They're like, well, what do I say to that? I mean, I'm
Yes,
talking about like the Catholic Church, as we all know, which has been in the news recently with its whole, uh,
yeah,
abuse debacle.
that goes well back. That's right in the Bible.
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That goes right back. I think it's one of the first things I noticed where that could lead towards that was in the Old Testament, where I think they went in and wiped out all the Amalekites or something, and they said, I think it was
Take the
Deuteronomy.
children.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
children who have not been with a man, right?
yeah,
So, which
yeah.
I just like what?
Genocide and mass rape. It's one of those things where I actually read the Bible cover to cover twice while I was still a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And I did struggle with those parts, but I sort of rationalized it away by saying, well, the New Testament gets rid of all that. Don't worry about it.
Right. Yeah. New covenant. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I
Which,
hear a lot.
yeah, it's about confirmation bias and basically just ignoring the stuff you don't like.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And only you cherry pick all the good, lovey, warm, fuzzy feeling stuff, and get rid of the stuff that makes you go, ugh.
Yeah, there's also the sort of beating people down. The standard cult approach is to break a person down and make them identify with the cult. So in
Mm-hmm.
fact, leaving was quite painful. It was something where I felt like I'd lost my identity, and that's why I needed to sort of take myself out and sort of rebuild my own. I'd say epistemology, but I didn't know the word at the time.
Right. Right.
Um, it was just that to rebuild my identity.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, I knew. So most of my work friends, I think all of my work friends, were non-religious.
Right.
So I knew people that had, a good solid life foundation and were optimistic already. I think it would be a lot harder if you were in an entirely religious environment.
I imagine so. Yeah. Having friends like you have probably eased that transition to some degree.
Yeah, definitely. There's a whole group of guys I play D&D with that are just amazing people. So
Man, I haven't played that in so long. I kind of want to
I,
start a campaign again.
I think D&D actually contributed. So there were lots of little factors I could say that added up. One of them
Sure.
was so D&D is a place where you can imagine a world where gods exist,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a very different world from ours.
Oh, yes.
And also, one thing that religion tends to do is break down imagination. So if you talk to people who are very religious, they cannot entertain hypothetical questions. They're very black and white. They can't do probabilities. They can't do anything where you say, okay, imagine a world where this happens. Then they get stuck on the literalism of it and they can't
True.
process.
True. Well, they're so used to just presupposing everything.
Yes. So for an example, I would say something like, okay, well, if there was solid proof that God didn't exist, would you believe that God didn't exist? And they can't cope with that question. It's not even possible to entertain the thought.
True, and I've said that I've had discussions with believers before. I said, "What would it take for you to give up your belief in God?" And they pretty much usually always say, "Well, nothing." And then they have the audacity to call us closed-minded. Like
Yeah,
what?
it's completely irrational. But then that's what street epistemology is all about.
Yes,
Um,
actually, I am just about finished Peter Boghossian's book on Handbook of for Creating Atheists. So.
Yes, a manual for creating atheists. I discovered
Manual.
that
That's
and Anthony Magnamosco's channel. I joined
yep.
into that group as well.
Yeah,
Some
he's fantastic.
very, very patient people.
Yes, they are. And
I do my
Read
best, but
Nice is another one.
yeah,
Cordial Curiosity.
Cordial Curiosity is really good as well. Yeah. There's a
Yeah.
guy from England as well, Placing Pebbles, who's
Ooh, I've not
documenting.
heard.
Well, he's documenting all the failures as well. So he's recording everything he does badly as well as everything he does well.
Wow,
I
fantastic.
I have no idea if the other guys do that as well, but he specifically is trying to document the failures so that he can make people feel more comfortable
Right.
in their approach. Because the idea is, of course, to get everyone in the world eventually to have a strong epistemology.
Hmm.
Well, of course, yeah, you know it as well as I do.
Yeah, and I think Anthony has uploaded a few of his videos that weren't exactly in his favor, we'll say, but he puts them up there as learning experiences, right? So.
Yeah, and quite often ones that don't go anywhere, he'll actually give you uh, like timestamps where you can jump to the points where there's something to learn.
Hmm.
It's pretty good.
Hmm.
Yeah, his speeches, when he does presentations on it, he breaks it down really well and explains how to do it.
Yeah.
I tend to fail in my patience if I try that.
I'm having issues too because I want to do street epistemology as well, but I find sometimes my patience level isn't what it should be when it
When
comes to stuff.
somebody says something that's blatantly wrong, you just feel
I
the
know.
urge to correct them.
I know, and it's an urge that I have to learn how to fight, but it's tough. I mean, because you know in your head that what you're about to say is far more rational than what they've been spewing out, but sometimes
Yeah.
you just got to bite your tongue and let them
Yeah, the
finish
problem is you have to
ten
see it from
pounds.
their perspective. They have
True.
to be able to make the decision for themselves because they will fight outsider information. It has to come from the inside.
Yeah, agreed.
That's a very difficult thing to push on people. But I can't think of a better way of changing people and improving their lives
Yeah.
than to encourage them to see it from to change the way they view the rest of the world.
Well, sure, or at least encourage them to think a little more critically about stuff
In
because
fact,
you're taught not to.
well, one of the things that made me read The God Delusion, I think, was an SE style question
Mhm.
by someone who doesn't know anything about SE. It was just I was in a 2 hour car drive, um, and the guy driving with me from work said during the course of other conversations, because we got onto the subject of religion,
Mhm.
although you're never supposed to talk about politics or religion. Um,
Not at work, anyways.
but he asked me a question that was phrased really well. He said, "Other than the people, what do you get out of church?"
Mhm.
And of course, I think earlier I would have said things like, "Oh well, God answers my prayers" or so on. But I'd already figured
Right.
out at that point that prayers didn't actually work,
Right.
and also that it was a logical impossibility anyway. There was a point where I was in the church and thinking about that because I was supposed to pray for something, and I was like, "Well, what's the point of praying for it? Because if God has a perfect plan, then prayer is useless."
Yeah. Hmm.
And
Especially intercessory.
yeah, exactly. So, and then if prayers can change God's mind, then God doesn't have a perfect plan anyway. So, so to my mind, the only point of praying was to change yourself. It was just to
Okay.
express yourself.
Which you can
Um,
get through meditation.
yeah, so I already didn't think that prayer did anything. Plus, there's countless examples. People coming in was in wheelchairs and um, on crutches and all that, and just going out the same way, day in day out. It's like every time they're at the church, nothing happens.
Hmm.
The most they get is warm fuzzies. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
you can get from a
Uh,
concert, I realized.
it's yeah, and it's sad too because you know that inside these people are hopeful for something to happen, and that's part of. I'll be honest, it's part of one of the things that really angers me that these people who go into these places with such hope that God is going to help them, and they leave disappointed every single time.
The
And I
worst
can't
of that, though,
imagine.
for
Yeah,
me, the
well,
worst part is the blame. It's something that Darren Brown mentioned
mm,
in Happy that I'm reading at the moment. That he gets really angry about faith healers because what they do
oh,
is they blame the person for not being healed and say, well, you didn't have enough faith.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just adding insult to injury. It's breaking their spirit as well, where they go in constantly going, okay, I've got enough faith this time. I've given all my money.
Mm.
I've given everything I can, and I'm still not getting healed, and it
Well,
must be my fault.
yeah, and plus that not only that can lead to, I mean, you tell someone that it's their fault for something that didn't work, and then their brain chemistry starts going, and that could lead to even more like depression and stuff like that, just
Yeah,
because of that.
yeah. It is ultimately religion is basically like domestic abuse.
Mm.
It's an extremely abusive thing. Something that's Essence of Thought, I think. Peter Thurston.
Mm-hmm.
He's got
Yes,
a YouTube channel. I watched quite a few of his videos. He's really good. He's
I
very
very
good at
much like
breaking
his channel.
down the psychology side of it. I think he's very good at that.
Yes, I agree. His videos are quite informative and entertaining at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. He does say, I think at the end of each of his videos, like, don't insult the people, just insult the ideas. Although he does
Yeah.
tear into people quite a lot. He's,
Indeed, he does sometimes. Yes.
he started out patient, but it's quite funny watching him rant to people sometimes.
Yeah. Well, it's hard. It's like I tried to explain that because my buddy's girlfriend, who I often have these conversations with, and she's a tough nut to crack. But uh, I walked in there yesterday just to drop off some package of cigarettes that she wanted me to pick up on the way home from work, and she had that Joyce Brothers, I think her name is, one of the
Joyce
go
Mayers, is it?
something like that. Anyway, just going off and rambling. I'm like, oh, what the hell is this? And she goes, oh, shut up and blah blah blah. And we started talking, and I said, and she goes, you're so disrespectful. I said, no, Joanne, it's not so much that, because I respect you as a person, but your ideas I don't have to respect,
Yeah,
especially if I feel that they're bad or harmful ideas. And she didn't understand that, so she was, putting the two together. This is who I am. These are it's that part of who you are can be changed if you think a little more.
it's actually that sentiment something I learned from Firefly long before I read any philosophy. Do you remember?
Firefly. Yeah,
There's an
yeah,
episode where he says to Inara, because she said, "You'll fight a man to the death for implying I'm a whore, but you call me a whore to my face."
yeah, yeah.
And he said that I may not respect what you do, but he doesn't respect you. And
Mm.
so that's actually the same sentiment that was reflected
Yeah,
really in
that's a
Firefly.
good little analogy you found there. That's, yeah, it's basically the same idea.
I think, well, we get our morality from TV shows and novels and so on because it all comes through. That's what fiction and fantasy is all about, really. It's about taking our ideas and our ideologies and testing them in extreme situations.
Hmm.
That's what all myth is. I mean, that's what the Bible ultimately is taking their ideology and throwing it into fictional scenarios and seeing what happens,
Hmm.
and just trying to draw inspiration from that.
Hmm.
And I find that they get better with time. So the stories that we see in a culture are reflective of that culture pushing the boundaries and exploring out different paths. I think
Hmm.
the best example I've got from in fiction anyway is Ian M. Banks's books, the science fiction
Not
author.
familiar.
He died from cancer a few years ago, but his books are about a distant future where humanity has invented AIs that are benevolent, effectively gods to us.
Hmm.
They're just so super intelligent that they can predict everything a human will ever do.
Wow.
So what humans do then is humans don't need to work anymore because the AIs look after everything. The robotic, like they can just manufacture things at will. The culture, the series is called the Culture series, and
Hmm.
it's a very optimistic view of the future of humanity because it's a world in which humans effectively do what they want when they want, and
I
the
like it.
robots even stop them from killing each other. So
Wow.
if a human was to say murder another human, then they wouldn't be invited to many parties after that. It's like, and they would be given basically like a robotic security guard for the rest of their life who would just constantly monitor them. And because AI thinks so much faster than humans, you could never pull one over on
Right.
them. They're just
I
that
guess
much
they're
more powerful.
predictive powers are quite up there, I
Yeah,
guess.
to the point where they can literally read minds, which we can actually do now. Of course, in
Yeah.
neurology, you can even make someone do something using TMS.
Hmm.
Transcranial magnetic stimulation. I'm sure you've seen David
I've
Eagleman's
seen, yes,
show.
and
Yeah,
that is absolutely mind blowing.
yes, it's rather a terrifying thought if you extend it too far.
Well, there's one where I guess I watched that they ran a magnet over a certain part of this guy's brain, and he suddenly couldn't talk anymore. Like every time he tried to say something, it just come out as nothing.
Yeah, you can temporarily
Freaky.
scramble the speech centers. It's a good thing it
Yeah,
resets after that time. There
yeah.
was a book called The Wisdom of Psychopaths where the author had his area of the brain scrambled and was a psychopath for about half an hour.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there's a lot they can do with that, and it'll be interesting to see where they go
Hmm.
making these new discoveries. But I recently read Pinker's How the Mind Works.
Right.
Definitely a really good book. He really breaks it down. In particular, the visual construction matrix was amazing. The
Hmm.
way it turns into subroutines, and if you know anything about programming, he puts it all into like a programming analogy.
Right. Okay. Oh,
And it's
I
all about
dabble a little bit.
tiny decisions that all add up to make this whole routine of you seeing a person's face and recognizing it. Which, if you think
Right.
about it, is ridiculous. There's no way you can try and build that in with that sort of response time. It's crazy.
I just had to turn on the fan. It's starting to get a little warm in here.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
It
still
is getting a bit
still
warm.
pretty hot. Yeah, we went through a little bit of a heat wave there in July. It's like crazy hot in here.
Yeah, we had a drought for a while here as well. Well, the
Yeah.
world's getting hotter.
Well, yeah. But climate change isn't a thing.
Yeah, not in America though. America's climate will be
Yeah.
identical, but everywhere else will change.
Yeah, no, yeah, we're getting hotter summers and colder winters over here. So I think we had one of the coldest winters last year that we've had in quite some time, and it's unusual to get that kind of weather here in Vancouver.
Yeah, you get more extreme weather because of the more energy in the system. One of the things I did recently was I did a course in climate change because I wanted to know more about it.
Hmm.
I didn't finish the course because it involved coursework and writing essays and stuff, but I took all the reading material and I went through it
Hmm.
and tried to learn as much as I could about it that way. Like a free online course.
Yep.
I also did Carrier's course in philosophy, metaphysical naturalism,
Cool.
which turned out to just be me on the course. That was awesome because it was just me and him
Oh,
talking.
you're kidding.
Yeah, the forums courses he does on I forget the name. It's like a secular website, uh, but so you
You
can
mean
do philosophy courses, history courses.
that's not Pathos, is it?
It's not Patheos. I think it's actually called like Secular Web or something like that. I've forgotten
Oh,
the
yes, I know
address.
what you mean, and the name's not coming to me either at the moment, but I know
Yeah,
exactly
but
what you're
he
talking about.
puts courses out every now and then. So I did that one, and that was really helpful because that was when I was trying to rebuild my worldview, and he
Mhm.
really helped me do that. And we argued back and forth about a lot of things, and he was very. I couldn't believe how quick he is. Like he thought of everything already. And
Yeah,
every time I think I've thrown a curveball at him, he just comes back with like a full explanation, deconstructing everything I've just said.
he's pretty amazing. He's
Yeah,
such a intelligent man,
you
definitely.
see that in the debates. I don't think I've ever seen anyone stump him.
Nope.
He's
Yeah, me
already
either. Not yet.
and he can quote exactly where in his book he's already debunked it.
Yeah. If you look in my book, blah blah blah, you'll see in chapter blah 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 that I already debunked that question.
That's the drinking game, isn't it? Yeah. Drink every time he
Yeah.
mentions a book.
Yeah. Is that a thing now? Because I kind of want to start watching his videos and try that out now.
I
I mean,
think he
I got a
mentioned it.
beer going right now, so.
Yeah. In one of his interviews, he actually mentions the carrier drinking game of mentioning books.
Oh, you're kidding. That's hilarious. I saw his interview with Anti-Ordinary. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but
I think so. I've watched most of them, but I can't place that particular name. But I probably have
um,
watched it.
well, it would have went through her channel. So, and she did a great little interview with him. Actually,
It
they were
sounds
talking about
familiar, I think.
when you mentioned the whole drinking game. I think that's actually where I had heard of it, but it didn't really register. You know what I mean?
Right, that makes sense. Oh,
Yeah.
on deconversion,
Mhm.
I did think about something else recently, because I've been sort of going over it in my mind and trying to piece together the steps, because obviously you don't go straight from one point to another. There are little
Oh no, it's a
stepping
path.
stones.
Yep.
There was things like, well, there was multiple things. One was getting used to the idea of blasphemy, because that's
Okay,
something.
sure.
Blasphemy is I think a duty. It's something that needs to be done, really, because you need to deconstruct bad ideas, and putting
Yes,
any idea on a pedestal is very dangerous. It
of
means
course.
that
Yeah.
you'll never find out if it's false. So watching comedians who just curse during the shows, and in particular watching Tim Minchin, Storm.
He's great.
Yeah, his Storm thing was great because it helped me look at alternative medicine a different way. But then
Mm.
later on, I reapplied that to religion and realized it has the same meaning.
Mm-hmm.
So they, I think, sort of laid some of the groundwork as well. Being able to laugh about religion is really important, because without that ability to change your mind, without the ability to question things, because comedy is all about deconstructing something and exposing the flaws in it, and
Yeah, the
changing.
ridiculousness.
Yeah, it's to take something down off a pedestal. It's to bring down, say, a leader who's normally unassailable. The comedy, the thing that makes you laugh, is the fact that a person has had their tables turned on them.
Hmm. Yeah, agreed.
In a lot of cases.
Ricky Gervais has a lot of good stuff on that as well.
Gervais, yeah.
Or Gervais? Is it Gervais? I never say it right.
Yeah, Ricky Gervais, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, the
he's
first thing I saw him in was The Office, the original one. That, of
yeah.
course, we
I
we
don't
steal all
like.
your TV shows.
That's true.
So.
uh, the humor doesn't always work the same way.
No, I know because it doesn't translate as well.
Yeah, a lot of the British humor is insult based. And I watched American Top Gear, and they didn't insult each other.
What's going on here?
It's lost the show. The whole point of the show is to insult each other.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with cars.
Yeah, I think one of my favorites for that, anyways, is got to be Red Dwarf.
Yeah, Red Dwarf's fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Rob Grant's written a few books as well. Fat, Incompetence, Colony as well. He's done some really good books worth reading. Incompetence is
I'll
about a
look
world
into it.
where people can't be fired for being incompetent at their job,
Oh,
because you're
you're
not allowed
kidding.
to discriminate against people for not being industrious. Um,
But that entire idea is kind of hilarious in its own.
it is a fantastic book. You end up with a police chief with anger management problems who keep shooting people, but they can't take his gun away because that would be discrimination.
Right. Oh, Americans love that one.
Yeah. Another thing I think that changed my mind was, of course, gay people are evil, and
Right.
you come to England, and then it's more like love the sinner, hate the sin. So it was less American outright murder all the homosexuals. But I met a gay guy that I worked with who was like the nicest person I've ever met. He liked all the same things as me as well, so we got along really well, played the same games, read the same books.
Awesome.
Fantastic guy. Um, yeah, I consider him a friend now. And that I really struggled with that, because I was like, well, here's a man that I'm not supposed to
Yeah. Yeah.
associate with, and here's someone that it literally says, because I'd read the whole Bible several times by that point, where it literally says torture him to death, as in
Mhm.
stoning is not just killing someone. Stoning is very slowly, agonizingly killing someone,
Yep.
and I
Yep.
think they miss out a lot on that, for something which hurts nobody.
But no, I know it's ridiculous. I mean, because of their choice of their sexual nature choice, we're supposed to like hate them. Like I don't understand that. Love is love, no matter where it comes from. And these people don't deserve that kind of treatment at all. They're just human beings like the rest of us. It's just their sexual preference just happens to be different than ours. And
Yeah.
so what? I was arguing with one of my band members last night about this, and he's talking about he's a big fan of Jordan Peterson about
Oh God, not
about
him.
I mean, I understand where he's coming from. Nobody should be forced to say when you have speech control type things, like you have to say, you don't. I look at it more as like you might know someone who's transgendered or non-binary or whatever, and you don't because it's not something that we've throughout history come across very often in a larger scale um, socially. Many people don't know how to address that, and when they're told that they have to address it in a specific way, I can understand them getting upset. Like, well, what do you mean? You can't tell me what I think and do, and I get that. But I said to him, I said, so, okay, once you find out who these people are, do you still have a problem using whatever pronoun they want? And he's like, well, I shouldn't be forced. It's not about being forced to, dude. If you are talking to somebody who's non-binary, but happens to be in a female sexed body, we'll say, because sex and gender are different. So, and you call her a her or she, and then she's like, well, actually, I prefer just to be referred to as they or something. And that shouldn't upset you. You should go, oh, I'm sorry about that. I didn't realize that. I will refer to you as that from here on out. And he kind of, at the end of it all, kind of went, oh, yeah, I guess so. And I guess, you see, so don't let any government tell you you have to do anything. It should be an automatic instinct for you as a human being to recognize how another human being wants to be addressed because this is how they identify. And you shouldn't have a problem with that. You should just go, yeah, no problem.
Well, it comes back to respecting a person without necessarily respecting their beliefs.
Yeah.
And if a person has something as part of their identity, then it can be quite damaging to see. This runs into a problem with religion, where religion is mixed up in people's identity.
Mm-hmm.
And respecting someone's beliefs, I would say you do have to respect the person. So if somebody really founds their identity in their religion, I don't have a problem with criticizing the religion because they are an individual person anyway,
Mm-hmm.
even if they adhere to a religion. It's like criticizing someone's political party just because they identify with it doesn't mean you're directly criticizing them. But it's an area where the lines are quite blurred, I think, as to what someone's identity really is. So with the approach of having to hate gays in such a way,
Mm-hmm.
which is well, it's not just hate gays. You're supposed to literally kill them.
Yep, many of all the scriptures mention that somewhere.
So my faith at the time, because I was still a Christian when I knew this guy, when I first met him and I got to know him,
Mm-hmm.
my God changed, and I realized that okay, so homosexuals are okay, so therefore God doesn't hate homosexuals, therefore it's perfectly okay. And he was obviously there was some mistakes or something in the Bible, people misinterpreting it. It was out of context.
I was just gonna say
Out of
misinterpretation
context.
there.
That's the one. And it wasn't until later, looking back, that I realized that every time my mind changed on something like the evolution thing as well, my God's mind also changed at exactly the same time as my mind changed.
Of
People don't
course,
realize this, that they are their own gods. That um, every time somebody
that's what
talks about their God,
Anton LaVey used to say all the time. We are our
yes.
own gods. Yeah.
See, from the outside, I used to think that was because he wanted to be a god. So I always had the impression that it was an arrogance thing and it was a sinful man and all that stuff.
Many people thought that about him.
Yeah. Alistair Crowley as well, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Talk about an interesting guy. Holy cow.
But the
He
thing
was
that
a little
bothers coming
nutty
in,
though.
well, it's interesting seeing it from the outside because when you see it from the perspective of there is a god and thought police and all that stuff, Hitchens explained it really well. As in the concept of a divine North Korea, where you'll be trapped forever with a god who knows what you're thinking.
North Korea.
Yeah, you're
Kim
trapped.
Jong God.
Yeah, it's the thought police. I think he described North Korea's approach as somebody picked up 1984 and thought, "Could we do this for real?"
Oh yeah.
Which is
And
pretty
yeah,
spot on.
it's kind of what they've got going on
Yeah.
there.
Which the whole concept of heaven doesn't make sense, of course, because heaven would mean thought police. It would mean you're not allowed to think thoughts that
Mm-hmm.
are other than godly and so on. So be trapped in a room with an abuser, and that person
Yeah.
can see what you're thinking, and you better not think
Yeah.
anything wrong.
Right. So much for free will at that point.
Yes,
You know what I mean?
and the idea that you could be happy in a heaven
Oh,
when
hang on.
knowing that your family members are burning in hell or something is ridiculous. We got some
Well,
questions.
I'm just checking now. I once again, like the idiot I can be sometimes, I forgot in the live chat you have to stop, or you have to change it from top chat to live chat, and I just did that. And Nadine has been looking for me to answer her for some time now. So the last thing was Neil calling all Neils. Are there any more Neils in here? Anyways, I'll just respond and see what she would like. Echo, echo, echo. Yeah, we got a couple of people shooting the shit in the chat here.
Oh.
They're making comments about my hair, like as if this is the important thing that we're discussing. My hair. Come on, seriously. And Shane says that love is a lie. I got to admit, yeah.
Interesting bit of a Rick and Morty vibe there.
Okay, well now they're just going on again. All right, you guys, I'm going to continue just talking here and put you guys on ignore. So
That's fair
you
enough.
guys can jump in the after party if you want. Nadine will jump in for sure because she's always open.
Sounds fun.
I know you've been here for a long time, Nadine. You're probably the first one that actually jumped in. So, and I'm glad that you're here because it's always fun to have you in these things when we do our after party. So if you're interested, just type yes in the comments, and then when we're done here in about 15 minutes or so, we'll start up an after party and we'll talk a little more.
Yeah, definitely going to the after party.
Yeah. You know what's really weird, Joel, is before we even started going, I saw your picture and because I was kind of lurking a little bit on Facebook to see a little bit about you and your family and stuff like that. And beautiful family, by the way.
Thank you.
I made them. See, you are God. You created your own family.
Oh, yeah. Great life.
And I saw your picture and I'm like, shit, man, I swear I've seen this guy before somewhere. But you just might look very familiar to people that I know from around
here. I do have the kind of generic face that people tend to say, I've seen you somewhere.
And that's one of the first things I thought. I go, this guy looks really familiar for some reason. It's possible we came across each other in groups too. So
I believe I'm the stereotypical white male, privileged, and all that stuff.
The cis male, the stereotypical cis male.
Yeah, dark haired, appears on every game cover.
Yeah. Preferably with the big muscles and some barbarian woman hanging onto your leg like this, like in European or in the vacation movie poster or something.
Maybe not the muscle.
I used to have them so long ago. But you get older and you don't go to the gym anymore, and beer takes over, and things change.
Got a desk job now. That's fatal to health.
Desk jobs, yeah. Luckily, I can still move around at what I do, so I still keep my girlish figure, we'll say.
That's good.
Okay, so
so
let's get back to the original conversation.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
So when I started to do all this investigation into philosophy and so on, I read Bertrand Russell's book, History of Western Philosophy. That was really important.
Oh, it's an awesome book.
Understanding it, yeah. He has such wit as well, and he manages to dissect these philosophers. There's so many. I would love to read about all of them. In fact, reading the scientist in the early Roman Empire, that made me really want to go back and study Greek philosophy, because there was so much I didn't know that he just brought forth and said, look at these amazing discoveries that these people were making, and they measured the diameter of the moon 2,500 years ago or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah. They were they were the ones that discovered the earth was curved, right? So.
Yeah, and even the arguments for that, I think it was Aristotle? I can't remember. There was somebody who came up with like 6 solid arguments for the Earth being a sphere. So that's it, settled.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that, of course,
it was Aristotle.
Judaism, of course, still had the firmament cosmology, with the flat Earth with its 4 quadrants. And there's a section in Matthew where Satan takes Jesus up to a mountain and shows him the whole Earth. Which
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, he shows him all the kingdoms in the world, doesn't he? And promises him, he says, you can have all this if you fall at my feet. And of course, on a globe, you can't do that.
No. No, you cannot. There's parts of the world you're just not going to see, like that other place that apparently doesn't exist. Australia. Did you hear
Yeah.
about that a little while back?
Yes, yes,
It
denying the
started with like
existence of
one
Australia.
girl. One girl had a Twitter or Facebook or something, and she was saying that Australia is made up. And
You never know how many of those are trolls.
I know.
Really difficult to tell.
I'm honestly, I believe that a majority of them are. It's just
It's impossible.
ridiculous.
I have had conversations with them where they do seem genuine. You can tell if they are suffering from cognitive dissonance just by asking them some straightforward questions. One that
Hmm.
they really struggle to answer is, "What is the furthest you have ever been from your house?" Because a flat earther is someone who does not travel, as a general rule. I'm sure there are a few.
Well, the real ones, I would imagine, are the ones that actually believe what they say.
They'll be part of a small cult community with very literalist meanings put on them, and there will be some leader or someone who has told them that the world is flat, and that's what they're following.
Hmm.
So those are the ones
It's
who
almost
feel,
like a priest.
yeah, that's pretty much how it goes. It's due to the nature of America in particular, the failing of the educational system, as Aaron Ra has explained many times,
Hmm.
the way they only have fire-breathing dinosaurs in a Kentucky book or something like that, textbook. Some
Oh,
ridiculous thing.
yeah.
And denying the
Don't
existence of
drag it.
slavery, and I
Hmm.
think I can't remember which state it was. He said one of the states actually said that the cause of the Civil War was not slavery.
You're
Actually,
kidding me.
yeah, that, I can't believe it when they say things like that. But then there was one I looked up because he said the 2012 Texas GOP manifesto or something like that explicitly opposed critical thinking skills. They opposed
Hmm.
teaching students how to think critically, and that is actually online. Loads of newspapers picked that one up,
Hmm. And
so you
that
can fact check
is,
that.
to me, that's diabolical to take that from people or to encourage them not to think that way.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
that's
extremely.
inhibiting life, if you ask me.
Yeah, if you took that to its end conclusion, you get Idiocracy.
Yeah, which was a hilarious movie.
Yes, I recently watched that. I'm surprised that America fell so fast.
Yeah, it's like they almost wanted to be that movie, right
Yeah,
to the
they're
point
getting.
where your toilet's built into your chair. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
I think they're getting quite close to it.
Yeah, it's looking that way right now. Hopefully, something changes and they kind of steer the boat back in the right direction. But right now, it's going right over to that waterfall and about to go over the edge.
Yeah, that's true. But hopefully the voters will turn that one around.
I hope so. I think there's more people in the U.S. that will do their damnedest to make sure that they don't end up going over that edge.
Yeah, you just have to hope
Hopefully.
they're in the majority.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of it's one of those weird things because if you look at the the voting and stuff like that they're talking about coming up in November, it's almost like it's half and half, and that's
Which is
kind of worrisome.
it's shocking, but when you have a choice between a political party that seem to be literally insane, in particular
Hmm.
their leader is a hideous demagogue, and then you've got the other party which is not insane. I mean, that
Or
seems like a
less
really,
insane, anyways.
I mean, yeah, in the case just of Clinton versus Trump, that was an obvious choice. It would have been better, I think, if it had been Sanders,
Hmm. I
but at
agree. I
least
think Sanders would have been a good choice, but
but at least Clinton is someone who doesn't seem likely to accidentally press a nuclear launch button or something.
true. At
And
least,
Trump,
the one thing I've always said is you've got two people, well, technically three, but ultimately Sanders got bumped out.
yeah,
But of the two people that were left, only one of them was technically qualified,
yeah,
right? As crooked as she is, and I don't know if she's as crooked as they make her out to be, but I still believe she definitely has. You get into politics and you rise up in power. Power corrupts, right? So people are going to do stupid things
yeah.
sometimes.
It's the nature of politics that you
Hmm.
can't be truthful all the time.
No.
The only way to actually get into power is to lie because of the
Hmm.
if you actually say what you really think about people, they tend not to vote for you.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And albeit, I look back and I think that a lot of Americans were just so sick and tired of the way things were going in their government that they thought they'd shoot for a wild card, and they voted for Trump, and now look at the shitstorm they're in.
Yes, well, something similar happened in France back when I was in school, actually, which was the French election system was two-tier, and it was Jean-Marie Le Pen was
Mm-hmm.
basically a Nazi. Nearly, so he got into the second round. So it was just he was one of two.
Mm-hmm.
So they almost elected a Nazi into power in France, which
Which
is
surprises me.
that's a pretty extreme statement. Now, I think he was severely outnumbered anyway. Even at that stage, I don't think he ever would have made it in. But it was a significant enough development that people were flying back to France to vote just to make sure he didn't get in.
Right, right, which makes sense. I would have too. I mean, if you think about it, I was raised in Judaism, so Nazis
Yeah,
don't
not so
exactly.
good. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and
I mean,
ultimately their values were Christian, of course, because of their diatribe against the Jews was almost identical to Martin Luther's against the Jews and their lies. Was it
mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm.
book he wrote? Which
Yes,
is very concerning.
yeah. When I lived in Israel, we went over all kinds of stuff about that. Went to the Holocaust Museum, and I have friends literally that still think the Holocaust was a hoax, and I'm like, no, man,
Yeah,
no.
I know a couple of people like that. They're extremely religious.
Yeah, and they're also dumb if they actually think that. There is overwhelming evidence that the Holocaust happened, including the fact that
That's
my family is now 4 members short.
yeah.
So
That's the really concerning thing is that they're not necessarily dumb. Some of them are very smart people. They've just been
sure,
misled. And the smarter you are, the better you are at rationalizing. So it can be some of the
yeah,
smartest people who get caught up in conspiracy theories like that.
yeah, absolutely. And that's the same as with my friend Dan. He's an extremely intelligent guy, but he's just got some odd ideas, right? And I try and convince him otherwise, but it's not easy to do sometimes.
It always annoys me when you get the firebrand atheists, usually the ones who've recently converted. And I was very angry when I first
Hmm.
escaped as well because I thought people have been lying to me
Yeah,
my
your
whole
whole
life.
life. Yeah.
I, in the sense that I've kind of wasted 30 years. I haven't really because of course
No.
I've actually done quite a lot. I'm still proud of, but
Excellent.
um, but I think that was hugely damaging. But then, of
Yeah.
course, I realized, well, no, they're not lying. They literally believe it as well, and it goes all the way back to the original viral meme of religion
Yeah, exactly. That's the weird sort of
and the cognitive
uh,
flaws. I
yeah.
think the God virus by Dr. Darrell Ray was pretty
I've not read
eye-opening
that.
like that. That's worth a look because he effectively communicates religion as a virus, and you can see the way it evolves. Um, it takes over people to the point where they'll even forego their own evolutionary advantages, such as priests giving up having children
Hmm.
just to spread the virus. And it's
Hmm.
not something that's sentient. It's just something that the way evolution works, it's just that it happens to be the most successful one wins out, which is why the Abrahamic religions, being um, very intolerant of other religions, were the ones that eventually beat the other religions.
Hmm.
And particularly, with Constantine and the people after him, basically making it illegal to not be Christian and taking
Yep.
the world by storm. So it just happened to be that that viral meme was the one that made it through. But yeah, Dr. Darrell Ray um, expressed that in such a way that I got a lot more empathy for the religious people and was less angry at them and more
Hmm.
seeing them as infected, which I
Yeah,
think
that's a
it
good way to
really
put it. Yeah.
yeah, doing SE is much easier when you see people as good people, smart people, people just like you.
Yeah.
And it helps me to think I was in that position not that long ago, and
Right.
I wasn't a bad person. I was just misguided.
I could, just knowing now what I know about you, I couldn't have seen you ever being a bad person. So um, the
Who
thing
knows what I would have done if I joined a cult?
well, all of us could say that, really. Um, you're right, though. I mean, good people will do good things. Bad people will do bad things. But it takes something like religion or bad politics to make an otherwise good person do something bad.
And that was either Victor Stenger or Steven Weinberg. I forget which.
That said that. I think you're right. I think it was Weinberg that said that. Originally, the first place I ever saw it, I think. Anyway.
Yes, it's the case of ideology overriding somebody's personal interests, or even their empathy in particular. There's something. It was again in the Brain with David Eagleman that he did a whole episode brilliantly about racism, and just pointing out that the first thing you do when you want to dehumanize a group, if you want to attack a group, is you shut off their water supplies so they can't stay clean, because disgust is the fastest way to override empathy.
Yeah, wow, I never thought about that. That's a good point.
If you make a people filthy, then it may have not been him, actually. It might have been Steven Pinker's book, The Better Angels of Our Nature.
Which I just downloaded the audiobook, actually.
A fantastic book. I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
Oh, I will. Pinker is a fascinating mind to me.
Yeah, that book was just overwhelming with just the facts he lays out, the statistics, and the way you can actually see the trends over time. Despite the bias and the way that the news tend to just put forward the idea that the world is getting worse, it is actually getting better.
I agree with that, for sure. I'm just going to find out who wants to join us in an after party.
Yep.
And we'll see what people say. I know for sure that at least Duke and Nadine will want to jump in. But Duke, you have to promise not to hog all the conversation, you big beast.
I'm quite garrulous myself. I can keep talking about this.
Oh, well, that's good because you've got competition. Well, Joel, I think we're closing on the hour now, so I generally like to keep these about an hour long.
Yeah,
and
a good.
We covered quite a bit of topics there. So I just want to thank you very much for coming on and sharing this with us.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, I think it's great. I think our voices need to be heard, and more of these stories need to be heard so that other people, like other faith believers that are on the fence, get an idea of how it kind of works and how people sort of leave their belief systems, and and so they kind of get an idea of what to look forward to and maybe better processes to help them in the long run. And that's why I do these sorts of things.
It's something that would have helped me, I think, if there were more stories like that around. There was the Clergy Project, but of course that's fairly closed off. But it was good to know that it was happening. Yeah,
there's also Freedom from Religion Foundation too. Or is it's not the Freedom from Religion one I'm thinking of. It's Recovering from Religion Foundation.
Right. Yes, Recovering from Religion.
Right. They are, from what I'm to understand, I haven't actually had any much interaction with them. I had a little bit on Twitter. From what I hear, they're a fantastic organization to contact if you are having these sort of personal dilemmas. And of course, watching stuff like this also can help people too, because they see how they can proceed, I guess, and feel a little bit better about doing so, to know that there's a community out there that has their back. And that's why I want you to get a little bit more on Twitter, Joel. I mean, you'll be surprised. I was actually shocked at how amazing the atheist community is on Twitter and how they're there to back you up when you need them to. So it's an idea, and I'd like to see you involved in some of our conversations.
Oh, if I ever find the time.
Well, your Facebook time that you claimed, you could bounce back and forth. That's what I ended up doing. It's just bouncing back and forth.
Yeah, it's always interesting to find new mediums and get used to them.
Well, you're about to meet a few of the wonderful people that I've come in contact with since joining Twitter, and I'll tell you, I jumped from something like 85 followers to over 600 in less than 4 months, just because of this community. Yeah, Well, they do what's called Follow Fridays, and you list a bunch of people that you admire on Twitter, and people are encouraged to follow these other people. And through that, I ended up with over 600 followers already, and that number will grow. And my subscriber rate on Twitter seems to go up 1 or 2 every day, which is a decent average for a guy that just started doing it.
Yeah,
So
it's a really interesting idea to do this because, in particular, it helps me think over my own process
mm-hmm.
in such a way that it's always worth sort of examining your own the steps that your mind took and whether you still
Yeah,
have any weaknesses left in there as well.
sure. It would expose them, actually,
Yes,
I think.
is it the unexamined life is not worth living? I think was what Socrates said.
Yes, and yeah, it's one
Um,
thing I definitely adhere to. I always question
yeah,
my decisions all the time. So
yes, the correct response to question everything is why.
yeah. I actually had that as my on Facebook for this is going back a few years as the header that you can get up there. Now that I've made my own personal one, but I used to
Yep.
say question ever that spray paint one, and underneath it says why. And I always thought that was just brilliant.
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to bring this one to a close. Thanks again,
Okay.
Joel, for doing this. I very much appreciate it.
I enjoyed it.
Um,
Thank you.
and I'm going to shut this one down, and then I'll send you a new link for the after party, okay? And I'll send it to a couple of the people as well if they want to jump in. I
Okay.
figure we get 2 or 3 more people in there, and it won't get too out of control because sometimes they can derail pretty quickly. So,
I'm all about tangents.
yes, yeah, me too. Actually, I like jumping it and then trying to keep track of the tangents you're currently on too, right? All right. Thanks again, Joel. And remember, guys, if you like this story, remember to subscribe and click that like button. And don't forget, they call it faith because it's not knowledge.